that as someone who was formerly a Republican, there's a very narrow line. And as long as you walk on that line, you're okay. But if your life goes to the left or to the right, you're no longer welcome in the party. And for the first time in my life, I realized that the rules that I had been living by didn't work anymore for people like me, for someone who was suddenly thrust into poverty as a single mom. And so I had a bit of a paradigm shift, and I started going to counseling and learning about myself and the world, and then had this desire to help others. So I was first checking groceries at Hy-Vee for $8.50 an hour, eventually started working in nonprofit and finished my master's degree in mental health counseling. As a therapist, I really enjoyed being able to help others, to help them to a place of freedom and reaching their potential. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to change the systems that were harming people at a broader level. And so I began working as the executive director of the Beacon, which is a nonprofit home and programming for women who are coming out of trauma. And I'm meeting these women, and they've experienced homelessness, incarceration, mental illness, substance use disorders, domestic violence, all kinds of complex trauma that they grew up with. And then they were being incarcerated for substance use disorder because they couldn't afford anything else. And I wanted to change that system. I wanted them to get support instead of punishment. And I wasn't getting anywhere. I said, these women need support in our community. They need a place where they are treated with dignity and they get access to the services that they need to reach their potential. Nobody was responding to my emails. Nobody was helping me find the way to set up an alternative to jail. So I took the LSAT last minute. It's the test you take for law school. And thankfully, Drake Law School in Des Moines gave me a full ride. I've got about 7 weeks left, and then I'll But through that education, I was able to open the doors. It gave me a seat at the table. And women especially, as you know, sometimes you have to have credentials to get in the door, which is unfortunate, but it's the way it works, right? And so through that, we were able to launch jail diversion last year, the first and only pretrial jail diversion for women in our county. And so now women can stay in our housing. We have community living and we have apartments. They can stay connected to their kids, have jobs, get mental health support. And this is $26 a night, whereas you and I, as taxpayers, are paying the government $106 a night to incarcerate people. So for a fourth of the cost, we can do something that's both socially responsible and fiscally responsible. And I think as Democrats, that's something that we could message better. That programs that are efficient and socially responsible are also fiscally responsible. Every dollar you invest in childhood poverty saves the government $7 when that child becomes an adult. And I think there's this idea from Republicans that we just want to throw money at all this stuff, right? And just spend more and more and more. When what we're looking to do is to be responsible. And when we message that way, I think it helps people to understand why we're doing what we're doing. So now I'm seeing this systems change happen. So we support up to 66 women at the Beacon and provide this alternative to jail for them. And of course the outcomes are better, right? Of course women are growing and healing and building their careers and relationships with their children. And it's so much more effective than isolating them and locking them up. And so I'm in politics because I learned that this is my sweet spot. This is my skill set, is looking at systems that are harming people, figuring out how to change them, educating the community, and then the trickiest piece is getting stakeholder buy-in. So the decision makers, they're the ones with the power and the money. I can't go to the people in charge and say, hey, let's decriminalize poverty, right? That's not their interest. But if I say, Your jails are overcrowded, and there was a murder in your jail this year, and I know you don't want that. Here's an alternative. If I can say to a judge and the attorneys, hey, you keep seeing the same people over and over again, and you feel discouraged, and it's taking up a lot of your time, I have something that can be better. Then we get their buy-in because I'm speaking to them in something that matters to them, and that's how we get the buy-in. And then finally this final piece is this determination then to actually go and fix the problem. I think we could all name maybe 1 or 2 systems in our government that aren't working right now. But here's the thing. These systems come from our government. These systems were created by our government. And now the government is asking nonprofits to fix these systems. And it's like taking buckets of water. The boat is filling up with water, and social workers and healthcare providers are trying to empty the boat as fast as they can, but there's holes in the side of the boat. So the best we can do is just keep it level. But I want to go in and fill the holes so the boat stops filling up with water. And so getting into Congress gives me an opportunity to get in, to see those systems, to figure out solutions, to get the stakeholder buy-in, to educate our communities. One of our top issues right now is protecting the rights of women, to get reproductive care, to get health care. How far is it for women in rural Iowa to get access to an OBGYN? What about in time of emergency? How long does it take for a woman to get health care quickly? It puts so many women at danger. How tricky is it to get your basic screenings done, to look out for cancer? When you have to drive, some women in Iowa drive up to an hour and a half to get those basic screenings done, and you probably put it off a little longer if you know it's going to take a day to get it done. Iowa has the second highest cancer rate in the country. That's one of the reasons. We also have some water quality issues. We have some healthcare issues. Number 2, an income that works for all Iowans. Can you remember the days when someone working 40 hours a week provided enough for the family? That's not the case anymore. So many folks are working 40 hours a week or 2 jobs, and they don't have enough to provide for their family. They're struggling to put food on the table, a roof over their head, and still get their kid a backpack for school. You all work hard. It shouldn't be that difficult to pay the bills. But we see this corporate greed, and we see this wage gap getting wider between those at the top and those who start at entry level. Number 3, moving away from extremism. This has been one of the least productive Congresses in our history. Voted for Speaker of the House 19 times. They're not getting anything done for the American people. The Farm Bill is still sitting there. How many continuing resolutions have we seen? I heard a podcaster say that this Congress is legislating procrastination. Those are some of our top issues. And there are so many more. They're all connected. And they come back to this central theme of looking out for you, of looking out for your family, and not just the interests of those with money and power at the top. They're connected. And those are democratic values that can resonate with everyone. But the problem is that the Republicans, and especially the MAGA Trump Republicans, have done a good job of messaging. They've come up with this united front of messaging that the Democrats are out to get you, to take away your rights, right? And that they're looking to protect you. And we all know that this is not true, that they are systematically taking rights away. The party that was supposed to be about small government and fiscal responsibility is not living up to those values that they claim. And so just like me, when I moved away from republicanism and started to embrace democratic values, You have friends and neighbors. You have coworkers and family members who believe that Trump is the answer to their problems. And when you show up with democratic values and communicate with them in a way that shows that you believe they are worthy of respect and dignity, regardless of their bank account, regardless of their position in the community, it provides a safe space for them to land. You're opening the door to this room where we sit and saying, you are welcome here. The Republican Party is not what it used to be. And I want you to know that you're welcome here, that we care about you, that we want to protect your rights. Congress is 29% women at a federal level and a state level. Do you think we would be talking about abortion rights in 2024 if we had gender parity from the beginning? We would have taken care of this a long time ago. Do you think we would be talking about LGBTQ rights if we'd had gender parity from the beginning? I don't think we would. We need more women in Congress, in office, at every level. And I think that that is going to be our ticket for this campaign. Because the top of mind issue right now for voters is this issue of choice. And I have registered Republicans volunteering on my campaign. I have registered Republicans donating to my campaign because they're tired of having their rights taken away. And they see that we're looking out for them. This election in the last cycle was lost by 2,145 votes. Do you think there are 2,200 women in this district that are scared about their reproductive rights, or their daughters, or their granddaughters? And we offer protection for them. We offer support for them. And so we wanted to find out, is this true? Is it that a female candidate, especially one who's experienced issues as a woman, right, domestic violence, and those are adjacent to things like abortion and sexual assault and gender pay equity and access to child care and all of these other women's issues, right? And so we had a third-party poll, and we surveyed over 400 folks, registered voters in this district. And when I went head-to-head against the incumbent Republican Zach Nunn, I beat him by 6%. Folks, if nothing else, I want you to leave this space with hope. Iowa is not going to continue to be cherry red. Folks are tired of having their rights taken away, of having our public education system gutted, of having more folks getting cancer and more mental health issues. They are opening up their minds to Democratic candidates in ways they never have before. And we can seize this opportunity by providing a safe place for them to be welcome and to land. And my race is not just about this seat. We are collaborating with state candidates so that we can share resources, because we can't work in silos when we're in the minority, especially. We have to come together. We have to link arms. And so that we collaborate our campaigns. We can't door knock on one house for one candidate and then 1 week later, another candidate, the same house. There are efficient ways that we can do this and reach more people more effectively. When we send out marketing materials, we can include multiple candidates by coordinating our efforts and saving money to do this. There are effective ways that we can work together. And this will allow us to flip multiple seats up and down the ballot. It's not just about this race. We've got to protect Iowa at a federal level and at a state level. And I'm here to say I'm ready to collaborate, to work together, both with candidates in our state and with folks in DC to get things done for you. Thank you. Would there be any questions? Yes, thank you.
When I watched you, was it yesterday at the Capitol? My days are kind of mixed
Yeah,
up.
I know. I feel that.
You really emphasized your survivor role in your why you're running. Can you talk a little bit more for the benefit of the folks that didn't see you yesterday about the end of that relationship and what happened to your boys? Because I don't think they've heard much about your boys.
Sure, yeah.
What was your process in getting out?
Yeah. So for me, there was this cognitive dissonance in my brain between what I believed was true about the world and how I felt, what I was experiencing. And at some point, those couldn't both exist in my head. And there was sort of an implosion, right? And I chose to go with my intuition. And when I got out and I lost essentially everything, I had these 4 little boys, and it was a difficult time, right? And I remember one of my sons saying, he was probably 6 or 7 at the time, and he said, "Mom, I know you can't get stuff for us like you used to. We can't do the stuff we used to do, but I know there is love in this home, and that's what matters, Mom." Yeah, and now today they are my biggest supporters, right? When this opportunity arose, they said, they conferred with one another, they're really good friends, and they said, and now they're 19, 17, 15, and 13, and they said, "Mom, if you don't do this, we're gonna be mad at you." And my 13-year-old came up to my room and said, "Mom, you don't want to be at the end of your life and look back and regret that you didn't take this opportunity." But there was a point in their lives when they had to wrestle with, I've got 2 parents who believe very different things. And I can remember sitting on top of a rock at Sylvan Lake in South Dakota with my son, and he said, how am I supposed to decide what to believe? And I said, "You're actually in the best position because you don't have people just telling you what to believe. You've got options. You're going to learn how to be a critical thinker. And I will never tell you this is what you should believe. I want you to go on that journey yourself." Thankfully, none of them are Trumpers. But it was something that we journeyed together. And I learned through that process that the Democratic Party was a safe place for me. It was safe for me to ask questions, to wonder about the world and the ways things worked, about different beliefs and different ways that family looks, right? Because all of a sudden our family looked very different, right? And we didn't fit into the same spaces we used to fit into. And it was a powerful transformation. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the democratic values of this party is because they were life-changing for me, and provided a way for us to grow as a family and to move forward. So, does that address?
Thank you. Yeah.
I was just going to mention, I don't know who's responsible for the 2 commercials that have been on TV against.
That's Lou.
Good job. One's a farmer and one's prescription drugs.
Oh no, that one might be something different. But the
those I've seen.
Tony, I think that's is that Progress Island or Tony Thompson? I think maybe that's a really good one. The farmer one.
Yes.
Yeah, but you do need to see it. Lou made a commercial of my 4 boys talking about why we need more moms in Congress.
Oh no!
And if you
is
go
that
on
showing around here too?
it's not on TV. It's on social media right now.
Oh, okay,
Facebook,
okay.
YouTube, right?
But if you go on any of my social medias
I
or
will
YouTube,
look.
it's
Yeah.
very sweet.
You got it.
It's very sweet.
But those are, I
Yes.
think they're very effective.
Those are effective.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And when you have a farmer telling the story,
That's right.
I think that's a very effective. Yeah, those weren't. I think those were funded by outside political.
And
groups.
for seniors with prescription drugs,
Yes.
or anybody with prescription drugs, it's well done.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Very good. It's always helpful.
Yeah.
It helps our cause.
Yes.
We didn't have to pay for it either.
Yes.
So. Yeah.
And I'll look for the ones on social media.
Oh, I think you'll like that.
Melissa, are you taking PAC money at all? Political action committees?
Not corporate.
Not
No
corporate.
corporate PAC money. No, we did just get a national endorsement from Vote Mama, which we were pretty excited about. So, So here's an interesting fact. Less than 7% of people in Congress are moms of minor children. There are 3 times as many men named John in the US Senate as there are moms in Congress. Yeah. And so for a couple of things, we miss out on the mom's perspective when they're not well represented in Congress. But also for those moms, if they feel like they have to wait until their kids are grown to start that part of their career, again, it's another way women can be more behind in their careers too. So, yeah. So Vote Mama's a pretty cool. I was really excited about that endorsement.
Very
So,
good.
yeah. What else have you got? Questions about issues or things you want to share with me that matter to you? Yeah.
So when you're elected, aside from women's health privileges and rights, what would be your top couple of issues?
Yeah, so I think that top one would be codifying Roe, right? Access to abortion and reproductive rights. I think finding ways to protect families so that they're not in economic disparity, right? Even something simple like the child tax credit, right? It doesn't cost us anything, but it helps families to pay for childcare, right? Because it divides the money out. I think we need to take a look at what we're doing agriculturally, right? And we're seeing some ways that we could protect our water a bit more and protect from erosion. I think those are some important things. So pursuing being on the ag committee as well as health, like something like health and human services. Obviously, I have some interest in affordable housing, ending homelessness, and some of those kinds of things. It's hard to narrow it down because there are so many issues that I think are really important right now. There's a lot of repair work to do. And so, is there something specific that's really important to you?
The child care tax credit, absolutely. Clean water, absolutely. And yes, women's reproductive rights. There's my smart brain and then there's my baptized Catholic brain. So
it's a real thing. And I think the piece of that is, and even as we're talking to our friends and neighbors, is the law is not telling someone they need to go and make that choice,
it's
right?
not a mandate that you have to do it.
Right.
It lets somebody else do something that you would never in a million years do yourself. And maybe that's what the country's all about.
Yeah. You know, I was purchasing some clothing a few months ago, and of course I got talking about politics with the store clerk, as I often do. And she said, you know, she was someone who was probably more like anti-choice, you know, anti-abortion, and she got pregnant last summer, and she was really excited to be pregnant, and in about 20 weeks they had an ultrasound and got some bad news, right? And so she needed an abortion, and she's like, that's something I never thought would be in my life plan. And she started to cry, and she said, what if I lived in a state where I couldn't get one? And she's like, I can't afford to take time off of work and drive out of state, and then there's a 24-hour waiting period, and then I gotta, you know. And then for like clients at the Beacon, my nonprofit, like they can't get a car, they can't get transportation, you know. And so there's this patchwork of reproductive rights across our country that makes it really difficult for women to have access to what they need, even when it's, you know, a life-threatening situation. And obviously we're seeing that's only the first domino, because now they're talking about IVF, birth control. I mean, it's not just about abortion, right? It's about control, and there are more things coming down the pike after it. Yeah.
And I was shocked. I shared this with my husband the other day, and I said, John, you do understand that women in Iowa who are raped, you know what happens? Thanks to Brenna Byrd, our Attorney General, former Guthrie County Attorney. Do they get the morning after pill? Do they get tested for STDs? Do they get any kind of services as far as, you know, oh my God, maybe you're pregnant, you know? Here's what you can do. Here's the options you got. Nothing. Nothing. And how terrifying that must be.
And then there's these pseudo-crisis pregnancy centers.
Yes.
I was talking to
government wants to give money to.
A friend of mine who's an OBGYN, and she said, you know, somebody donated an ultrasound to one of them, and then somebody else comes in and uses it with zero training they're not an ultrasound tech. And they're coming in, women are coming in and thinking that they're in a medical facility, getting medical advice. from folks that are not licensed to do this, it's scary. But again, it's that thin line. If you're gonna align with the Republican Party, there's a very thin line you have to walk on, and there are very strict rules about being on that line.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When you're talking to people about the economy, and even though in many areas the economy is doing pretty well, that still seems to be something that comes up.
It does.
What do you say to someone? Well, my groceries are costing more, my everything's costing more.
Yeah.
And that seems to be one of the talking points of the MAGA Republicans.
That is an excellent question. So, economists predicted, bipartisan economists predicted that our economy would grow by 0.3% last year, and it actually grew over 3%. So by the numbers, when you look at the numbers, they look really good, especially compared to what was predicted. But what you feel on a day-to-day basis can sometimes be different. I don't know about you, but I've been feeling the stretch a bit more from paycheck to paycheck than I have in the past. And I think there's another issue that has not been addressed quite as fully, and that's the corporate greed piece. And so that's where there are, President Biden changed the top tax rate from 35% to 21% for corporations, and that change, we lost a lot of tax money, and those top level executives got to keep a lot more in their own pockets. If you have $1 million and someone gives you another $1 million, it's probably going to go into your retirement fund or a stock. If you have no money and someone gives you an extra $100, you're gonna, we saw this at the Beacon with the stimulus checks. The women, every woman in the Beacon house, these are women with the least amount of money and social power in our society, spending the money on rent and food and toiletries. For the most part. I saw it with my own eyes. And so, we learned from Reagan era, right? The trickle-down economics don't really work, right? For that very reason. And so then what's happening is if there's more and more money accumulating at the top and the consolidation of corporate America, right? So there's things like price gouging and things happening that hurt everyday people. And I think that's probably a bigger reflection of what's happening in our economy. We're not raising how much we're paying people. They're still making $10 an hour, and now the CEO just got another bonus to buy another jet. There's nothing wrong about being wealthy, but there is something wrong with exploiting people who are not. When I got to the Beacon, I cut our operating expenses by 20% and infused that into staff compensation. I increased everybody's pay, other than my own, by an average of 43% in the first year, and by almost 100% within the first 3 years. We have almost no employee turnover. They have 100% medical insurance. It changed our organization. And you know what? Our revenue actually doubled. Because people were drawn to an organization that had a strong foundation, that treated their staff well. And I think corporations and organizations that take care of their people would see actually better success in the long term for themselves too, because you're not dealing with such high turnover. But yes, I think that does come up, so I appreciate you asking. I think another item that comes up a lot is the border, as I'm talking with folks. And so I think it's good for us to say, hey, the border is an issue that is solvable with more judges, with more patrol folks, with more administrative help. We can make ways to connect families who are looking for economic survival with employers who need employees. You all probably know farmers or manufacturers that are having trouble hiring. Let's pair people up that are here for ethical reasons. Let's pair them up. And then let's filter out folks who might be carrying fentanyl or be here for some other unethical reason. And so we can talk about, we don't have to get defensive about the border. If people say, well, what about the border? Biden and the border. Yeah, it is a problem. It is a problem. The more that we can agree with people and meet them where they're at, the more likely they are to listen to what we have to say. Yeah.
You need to remind them that the average 2 years, it's 2 years ago information, so it may be slightly different now. I was on a trade mission to Mexico with IEDA, actually. And the United States ambassador to Mexico met with us.
Nice.
And he gave us a debriefing of, this is what you're getting into. And so I was on the front row and I was writing notes so I could remember stuff. And he was going through stuff pretty fast. And he said, 60% of Mexico lives in poverty. He said, there are a lot of people that have a lot of money in Mexico. But the country as a whole, those 60% live in poverty or below poverty. He said the average wage earner in Mexico makes $8.32 a day. Of course, I stopped and I looked up and I was right there in front of him. He said, that's right, sir. I said $8.32 a day, not an hour.
Wow.
And so the next place we went to was a deboning place that actually had Waterloo Tyson hams in it. We had a Tyson guy with us, and that was kind of neat and ironic. But we asked him about what do those people get paid. He said, well, they're the deboners make $20 a day. And he said, that's a 10-hour day.
Wow.
And I said, so what are the about breaks? He said, well, we let them have lunch. That's less than I said,
Yeah.
you know.
How
And
generous.
then the guy from Tyson actually spoke up and he said, my people in my Waterloo, Iowa plant work less than a half an hour for what your people work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And one of my friends with the USMEF lives in Monterrey, Mexico, and I said, Gerardo, we need to tell that story.
Yeah.
Because that's why people are flooding to come to America for an opportunity that we all had. And I said, somehow we have to get that story out. It's not to there are bad characters bringing drugs and doing whatever else, but I didn't notice that we were crime free in the United States inside our borders. So, but you know, I think that will resonate with people.
Absolutely.
At least 2 years ago, $8.32 a day, and people there were working for what people in Iowa were working less than a half an hour.
Wow, that is powerful.
And so, being on the ag stump there, how do you convince, or can you convince the Farm Bureau for the first time, maybe ever, maybe Harkin got their nominee once, that he's a friend of agriculture. How do you get in with that pool of people to convince them that you are a friend of agriculture and try and persuade some of those voters to vote for you instead of them?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And I think Nunn does a really good job of saying one thing and voting another way. And I think like one of those ads you pointed out does a good job of pointing out the hypocrisy, right? Of him, he pretends like he's from small town Iowa. I went to high school with him. He's not from small town Iowa. He came to high school wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. He was ready to be a politician. Yeah, he was ready to be a politician at age 15. And the thing is, when your identity is politician, you will bend your values to get money and power to stay in that lane.
Right.
For me, this is me. These are my values. You've heard my story. You know where I stand. I will always show up authentically. Politics is the chair over there. It's something I do. It's not part of me. I will not change who I am for that chair, right? And so what the model that has helped me the most in helping folks change is something that is research done by Prochaska and DiClemente. And there are 5 stages of change according to this model. The first stage is pre-contemplation. This would be someone who says, Republican values are just fine. There's nothing wrong with the Republican Party. Trump's the way to go, right? And they don't see any problem with that. The next stage is contemplation. Well, maybe he's restricting some of our rights, or maybe he's not so good for the economy for everyone. The next stage is preparation. Okay, there's a problem. I don't necessarily know what to do, but there's a problem. And folks that are in that preparation stage, that's when you invite them to your meetings here, right? Because then they get to the action stage. Okay, here's what I'm going to do about it. So when you're talking to folks, it's really helpful, or talking to an organization, talking to the Farm Bureau, what stage is this group or this person in? And how do I message effectively to someone in that phase? So someone who's in pre-contemplation, they don't want data and research. You've tried it, right? And it didn't go so well. It didn't go so well. And you felt discouraged. Sometimes we want people to get from pre-contemplation to action with our one, our one research article that we show them, or our snarky Facebook meme, right? But if we can get folks from pre-contemplation to contemplation, we can do that through storytelling. Like the story about the woman who thought she would never have an abortion and then she needed one, right? Like my story, your own, maybe something in your own life that has changed you. Oh, I once thought that everyone should be straight, but now I see differently because of this, right? So whatever that story might be, that was your change of heart. Humor can be effective. Keeping it light, open-ended questions. Tell me about how you came to that conclusion. What do you mean by that? Right? Have them explain where their beliefs come from. And you don't have to challenge them or question them, but have people talk about their beliefs, because sometimes you'll start to see circular reasoning and they might see it themselves. Then when folks are in that pre-contemplation phase, and then they move to the contemplation, then we can start presenting some potential positions or data or research, right? That kind of helps them get to the preparation phase. And I have found that it is less discouraging this way. If you think of, okay, my goal is just to get someone from pre-contemplation to contemplation. For a lot of our independent and Republican women especially who are going to be voting in this election, they don't need to be in the action phase of Democratic politics to vote for a candidate like me. They just need to question, is Trump going to protect my rights as a woman? Is Trump going to protect my granddaughter's rights? And if they have some questions about that, they might vote for a candidate like me, even if they're still a lifelong Republican. So don't feel like you have to get everybody all the way over here. It takes some of the pressure off. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that you can campaign in the 3rd District of Iowa without volunteering your positions on foreign policy? Everything you talked about, including border, I think, is a domestic policy issue. You haven't discussed foreign policy. Is that because you think that Central Iowa is not interested in foreign policy?
Oh, I think it's important. So, for example, Ukraine. We care about the folks of Ukraine, right? We care about the children, the families there. In fact, one of my classmates in law school is from the Ukraine. She came to the United States to study law, and I was sitting beside her in class as she's getting texts and waiting to hear back. Is my brother okay? Is my mother okay? And she was terrified, right, as the war was beginning. So I care about the people of Ukraine. Also, it's bigger than that, right? Because if Ukraine falls to Russia, democracy across the globe is at stake. Just like the abortion issue, Ukraine is just chapter 1, right? And so I think it's really important to pay a lot of attention and give a lot of support to Ukraine so that it doesn't spread. That movement of the consolidation of power and fascism, like that, those things don't take over the world, because there is a threat to our democracy. Things like Israel, what's happened in Israel, what happened on October 7th is a tragedy beyond words. You see those pictures of those children and those families and the violence, and it's heartbreaking. And rape should never be a weapon of war, right? So I support the talks around having an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and most importantly, that we provide a lot of humanitarian aid, maybe more than we ever have before, to that whole region, because there's so much suffering there. And as we move forward, looking at those two-state solution and how we can move forward in a way that protects peace in that region, I think those are really important issues. Yeah, thank you.
You hadn't brought anything up about it, and I was just curious, why not?
So there are lots of issues. Well, for example, we didn't talk about gun safety yet, right? You know, there are lots of issues, and so, you know, when you're coming out to talk to folks and you're trying to figure out which ones are your highlight ones, right? But there are, of course, many that I would advocate for and support. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your question.
So tell us about gun safety.
Yeah. This is an issue that I think has been polarized to a point where people can't talk about it. And it's really unfortunate because if you actually sit down at the table with someone who might have a very traditionally Republican stance on gun safety, like, you're actually closer than social media would make you think. If I say to my Republican friends, would you support having protections around gun ownership in the way that you would support protections around driving a car, that you have to pass a test, that a background check, you get a license, that you've taken some safety training, similar to driving a car, that you wouldn't want the guns in the hands of someone who was a minor without supervision, or someone who had a domestic violence charge on their record. Most people would come to a pretty similar agreement on what some of those restrictions could be. But we've so polarized this issue that one side thinks the other side is saying, let's get rid of all the guns. And there are a few people that are like that, right? But the vast majority of folks are in the middle. And another side thinks, oh, over there, they're just thinking we should have just guns sitting all over the place. And some of them do. Some of them do believe that. But I think there's this space in the middle where most people are. And that we could come to an agreement on some things around what would be responsible and also thoughtful to folks. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
You mentioned about Israel and October's event. What about the Nakba when 1948, that the Palestinians were forced out of their homes so Israelis could take over their houses? What about the 7,000 or more that are held in prison in Israel who are Gazians or they're West Bankers who, you know, we're talking about release of the prisoners in Gaza or those held hostage. We aren't talking about those that are being held as prisoners in Israel. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good reminder, right? I think there's been victimization on both sides of this, and that both groups, we need to explore what is the most humanitarian way to move forward. So thank you. Yeah, thank you for that reminder. Yeah. Anyone else?
Did you bring nomination papers with you?
We do have a signature paper, yeah, that would be great if we could pass that around. So we have to have over 1,700 signatures to get on the ballot. And then the Republicans said you have to have at least, or over half of your counties have to have at least 47 signatures. They've tried to make it difficult.
Like voters, right?
So